You're listening to EdTech Heroes, a podcast that looks at how teachers in today's classrooms can use technology to improve student learning. In each episode, a hero in the world of education will share their story and discuss how innovation can influence the minds of the next generation. Let's jump in.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to EdTech Heroes. I'm Nef, and today's guest is Kasey Bell. Kasey is a former middle school teacher turned award-winning digital learning coach, international speaker, author, blogger, and podcaster with a passion for technology and learning. She's CEO of Shake Up Learning, which is full of amazing resources for using technology in the classroom. Kasey, welcome to EdTech Heroes.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm super excited to be one of the early guests on your new podcast.
Oh man, thank you so much. It's amazing that you said yes to us. So this is amazing. So I have a confession to make to start off. I have been rifling through your website and listening to your podcast. And I know that you have the back to school season on your mind. In fact, you're hosting a whole free conference for teachers, right?
Yes, we are. It is at the end of September, so hopefully after kind of the chaos of true back to school has died down for most, although everybody goes back to school at a different time too. So a lot of people have been kind of arguing, that's not back to school, Kasey. I'm like, well, we're not talking about, the all about me, how to get to know your student projects. This is really about adjusting to the new normal, whatever that's going to be. And so, yeah, it's completely free. It's all online and it's asynchronous.
Awesome. We obviously are huge fans of asynchronous content, but I want to talk a little bit about this new normal. I've heard that phrase thrown around a lot, and not just in education. You turn on the computer, you turn on the TV, and everybody is talking about the new normal. But I am curious, as someone who has been around education, who is an EdTech great, what does the new normal look like for teachers in the 2021-2022 school year, and how can they prepare for it?
That's a really good question. I think that depends on a lot of factors, and more so not variants and COVID and all of that, but more so what our leaders are doing, the decisions they're making right now to prepare for all types of possibilities, because I don't believe school will ever look the same again. I believe that online virtual learning that some students experienced over the last 2 years, some were forced to do it, some had the choice to do it in different areas. Now it is becoming sort of demanded, I think, by a lot of parents that, okay, I don't want my kids going back face to face. We're not ready for that. We don't think it's safe, or we just like it. There were a lot of parents and students who actually adapted well in that environment. And then there was the opposite. There were kids who don't do well in that environment. You have to be a certain type of learner, I believe, to really thrive in that space and take some ownership, and not every kid is quite ready for that. But I did actually a podcast episode last year where I interviewed a teacher who had been hired specifically at the beginning of the school year last year to be an online learning teacher, instead of this terrible hybrid idea that so many schools were doing, where they were asking teachers to do two different jobs at the same time. I do believe a face-to-face classroom teaching job is very different from teaching an online space. Those are two different jobs. And so what I see as the future is those two roles evolving separately. And that's what I hope. Again, hoping that schools can see it this way and see the power that it has to do it in that manner. And of course, hoping that we get the support from our lawmakers and funding and all of those great things. But preparing for success, I think, for teachers, kind of coming back around to your original question, but that landscape is changing. And I think some teachers are already experiencing some shifts, even after they've been in school for 3 or 4 days. And they're like, oh, well, we've got too many cases, we've got to do this, or, so they're having to do things on the fly. We were hoping we weren't going to be at this point, I know, at this type of school year, but teaching has always required flexibility. that has never not been the case. To be a teacher, you have to know that every day you walk into something different, and the demands on you are much more than what you get paid to do. But that's not why you become a teacher. Hopefully, teachers deserve so much credit for the back bends and the back flips they were doing to make things work. And I still think we are making things work, but instead of survival mode, we should be in preparation mode and restructuring our schools. Even some of the things I heard on the news today talking about schools trying to get certain infrastructure in place. A lot are building their own cell towers to get internet at home for kids. I think those are all steps in the right direction. And those are not steps that are going to go away whenever the virus is gone. These are things that are here to stay.
Absolutely. And it sounds like there is a bifurcation between things that are systemic and need to be solved by our policy leaders, our district leaders, and things that educators might have some control over. And as an educator who might be listening, who is thinking that they're going to have to deal with more absences than they've had in previous years, an educator who might have to deal with rolling quarantines and isolation, or an educator who might have to deal with this hybrid model where they are being asked to teach kids both virtually and in person. What can they do to be able to prepare for that, to be able to do that effectively or as effectively as possible?
And I think there are a lot of things that we have to embrace that we've never embraced before as part of that question. One of the things that I have talked a lot about over the years that only kind of became the cream at the top of everything I was sharing recently is this idea of asynchronous learning, something I know you're also a fan of, that every kid doesn't have to do exactly the same thing at exactly the same time, and everything doesn't have to be in this live teacher-led environment. For years, we have been trying to get this shift from, the sage on the stage to the guide on the side. How many times have I said that phrase over the last 10 years? But that's truly what was needed in this moment, because we couldn't translate what we had done and had been doing for so many years when you tried to put it online. How many times have teachers tried to take the paper assignment, put it in Google Classroom, and wonder why it doesn't work? Y'all, we have to rethink. We have to rethink the entire thing. And sorry, I'm not sure if I'm staying on your question or not, but the idea that teachers have to be prepared for teaching in this asynchronous manner is very different. Taking on the role of as the facilitator, I share a lot of things like choice boards and embedding choice, period, giving students more ownership, helping them to manage their own assignments and time, and to learn how to use all of these tools that we have at our disposal for learning as opposed to distraction.
For sure, for sure. And one of the things, if I'm going to confess to you, I'll also say that I've been following you for a while, and I know that everything that you just posited are things that you've been talking about for years. You've been talking about Google Slides as a Swiss Army knife, talking about having students being able to take ownership over their learning. And maybe now we have a bigger platform for folks to understand the importance of asynchronous learning. But if you are a teacher who is relatively new to using technology in the classroom, or to thinking about this mastery-based model, where do you start, right? Because it can feel so daunting to go from using no technology or from being in a substitution place to really getting to a place where technology is enhancing the teaching and learning. What are some concrete steps that educators in that space can take?
Well, the number one thing is mindset. If you don't have the correct mindset, you're never going to do it. You're never going to understand. And everything else that I ever try to teach you will not sink in if you do not have a growth mindset. And so when I have an entire session that I do that's like the top 20 tech tip for teachers. And number one is mindset. It is really what sets us up for success through every other step of the journey. And you mentioned the idea of substitution. And I don't feel like substitution is always wrong. And it's especially not wrong when that's all you know what to do. Like I said, okay, all we know is I'm going to take what I used to do on paper and put it online. Okay, but now that I have learned a little bit more, then we can begin to do those other things. So those first steps really are just getting familiar with what you have available, what your school provides, what types of accounts are already set up for kids. That's always been a huge hurdle for teachers. It's even a hurdle for me as a presenter when I present to schools across the country, because every school has their own set of rules of blocking things, and we can't use this. And so, Kasey, don't talk about this, and those types of things, which is one of the reasons why I talk so much about Google. Because it is seamless. It's one login. So if you are a school that has gone Google, which I know very few that aren't these days, so, get familiar with those tools. But what's great about those skills is so many of those skills are going to transfer from what you used to do in Microsoft Office. If you've used a word processor, you can use Google Docs, but really taking those next steps to just click around, to get familiar, to have a sandbox, and really, to accept the fact kids need that too. When they are learning a new skill, we can't just expect to show them how to change a font and change a color and not let them play. So there is a little bit of a learning curve, but as a new teacher, reaching out and getting connected is another thing that has changed my career. So many people that I know, myself included, have said I've learned more on Twitter than I've ever learned at a conference. So getting connected, and it doesn't have to be Twitter because there's a million places to connect these days. I've got a Facebook group. Everybody's got a Facebook group. There's whatever you're comfortable with. There is support out there, even if you don't get it at your own school. Now, hopefully these new teachers are also receiving that support and training that they need. But I know that is hit and miss depending where you are and what kind of survival mode you may be in with the pandemic. But, I feel like that teachers have to start small, start where they are, and you build from there. Don't take on too much at once. Don't feel like, oh, because Kasey shared this assignment that uses 5 different apps in one lesson that I need to do all. No. Take a step back. Less is more. Don't overwhelm yourself, because if you're overwhelmed, your kids will be overwhelmed. And that is a big waste of instructional time. And so once you get in there, once you figure that, you also have to be willing to pivot very quickly. Because even when you try something new, it doesn't always work. And failure is acceptable. That's part of the learning process. So it's okay to fail forward, but also to realize, okay, this really isn't working. Let's shift gears and let's do something a little bit different. But I think it all comes down to those things that we've known as teachers, wherever you were 100 years ago: relationships, knowing your kids, and having those communication lines, wherever that is, face-to-face or online. That's going to help you figure out what's the best decision for your students in that moment, because it will change. And as teachers, we know every school year is different. Every group of kids is different. And so when we come back to that, even when we're overwhelmed by the technology, just remember to put kids first.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. When I was in the classroom and I would try new things, one of the things that I would do is I would let my kids in on it. I would say, hey, we're about to try something new. I have no idea how it's going to go. And sometimes they would say, wow, that was fantastic. We feel like we learned a lot. We had fun. And other times they would say that was awful. Let's never try that again. But I think building on that relationship and continuing to put students first is what's at the core of that. I want to go back a little bit to something that you said around building this professional learning community. And we know that there there are amazing resources on Twitter, on Pinterest, on somebody's Facebook group. You made the joke, everybody and their mother has a Facebook group, right? But you have to discern which one is going to provide the best community. So I'm putting you on the spot here, but if you had to recommend a couple of different resources or places where educators can go to find quality professional development, where would you send them?
Well, I think there are a lot of things on YouTube that are useful. Um, y- everybody's learned something on YouTube, and it is the second largest search engine. So even aside from just the connection part, if you're looking for a tutorial, somebody's made it. Of course, you have to filter through what's up to date and the junk and things like that. But as a teacher, that is a go-to, like, oh, I don't know how to do this. The other thing, just in terms of support and Google, support.google.com is your best friend. So if you're looking for, those how-to things, but in terms of the professional learning communities, there are so many hashtags I can't even keep up. There is a Shake Up Learning hashtag if you want to connect with me and other members of my team and people there, to ask questions, to connect. And we have a Facebook group as well. We do try to stick more to the digital learning side of things and not just, oh, what about my English curriculum? Or, so that really is what is great about there being so many options, is you can niche down. So you can find those groups that apply to exactly what you teach. I teach kinder, or I need help at sixth grade math. You can find those groups. I am even on TikTok. I don't know how many people are now doing that, but they're teachers of TikTok and TikTok teachers are two hashtags that you can follow on there. I have been posting tutorials there, although most people don't, but people probably notice I don't like to show my face a lot. I'd rather show a screen than my face. But that's, so I post tutorials on YouTube and then an abbreviated tutorial on TikTok. And I think it's not a matter of just what's the best group or what that used to be that way. It wasn't that long ago that there were, okay, this is a no-brainer. But, there are lots of places where teachers are just willing to help each other. And I think that's the key. I don't think a lot of other professions are quite as helpful to each other as teachers may be. I just don't see it. So, if you pop into the Shake Up Learning Facebook group and you're like, I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to create a Google form that will do this, this, and this, or I want to use it for assessment for this purpose, whatever it is, you can pop in there and ask a question and lots of people will respond. So I think that's, you kind of get the mass, the knowledge of the mass group instead of just reaching out to the teacher next door. You're talking to thousands of teachers at once, and that's pretty powerful.
Oh, that is crazy powerful to be able to draw on centuries probably of teaching experience if we think about everybody who is in the group. One of the other things that I know has been synonymous with Kasey Bell has been your love for Google. So I am curious, and it's even come out in this conversation, but I'm curious, when did you realize that Google was going to play such an important role in the future of education? And why do you think that this company and its tools is playing such a big role?
So my love of technology, I guess, goes way, way back. My parents owned an electronics business growing
Hmm.
up. So I grew up around technology. I had no idea that it really would kind of impact my teaching career when I decided to teach, but I was the techie teacher. I was the teacher who wasn't afraid to try things. And so when I wanted to get my master's degree, and I flat out knew I did not want to be a principal, so I was like, what else should I do? And I found a new program because there weren't very many at the time, because I'm old, y'all, that was in educational technology. And so when I got my master's and I was with that group, I knew these were my people. Like, this was it. And through that program, I was introduced to what used to be called Rightly. And that became Google Docs eventually. So I
Hmm.
was a very early adopter of that. I'm like, this is awesome. It's online. You don't have to click save. I can get to it anywhere I want and go from there. And so I just was, like an early adopter of every kind of technology, but that one stuck around. You have to be really careful when you get distracted by what I call the shiny objects. The new things that are out there may not be tried and true. And so as things grew and evolved, and I moved into more of a training position where I was teaching teachers instead of
Hmm.
middle schoolers, and seeing these things, come out. And then eventually Google for Education was
Hmm.
launched, and the Google certifications were launched as well. And I started seeing different people posting about their certification. I'm like, what is this? And do I need it? What's it all about? And so when I jumped into becoming a Google certified trainer was really when things shifted, because I wasn't teaching Google. Schools didn't have Google yet.
Hmm.
But I had to take like back then it was like 5 different exams on all the different apps and learn the insides and outs. Like, y'all, this is easy. This is so much easier than um, some of the other things out there. I'll try not to try not to destroy anybody else. I'm like, please don't ever send me a huge file again as an attachment. Please, please, please. So I just learned so much from that. And then as schools started going Google, and I started visiting with school districts to help them make the switch. And through that certification process, I just learned so much technical skills, but I connected with so many other Google using educators, and we just had so many new things that we could do in the classroom. That was really where the light bulb moment was. It wasn't that, oh, instead of using Microsoft Word, now we're using Google Docs. No, it was like, oh, I can use Autocrat, and I can do this, and I can do
Hmm.
that, and I can sort of make things do whatever I need it to do, and nerd it out a little bit over all of that. And that really just sort of took me in a different direction. So 2014, I became a Google certified trainer and a Google certified innovator, which used to be the Google Teacher Academy. And
Hmm.
so I was at part of the very last Google Teacher Academy. And that was really when things were just kind of taking off in terms of schools that were going Google. I've seen the shift happen, and how quickly schools can adapt. And I can't say that about a lot of other applications. Of course, it used to be free, which also used to be the biggest, and there's still the free version. I have some opinions about some of that too, but that it was free, it was unlimited storage space. I mean, it was a no-brainer to
Hmm.
to go Google. And so that became the thing that everybody asked me for. And so even if I want to learn something else, I don't have time for that because I have to keep
Sure.
up with Google. So that's that's really kind of how the shift happened.
Okay, so you are a Google OG, it sounds like. You gave us a history lesson through that. I don't think I knew that Rightly became Google Docs. Now I have to go down into the bowels of the internet and learn more. So, as you were talking, it sounds like there is a little bit of a criteria that you place on tech tools because you don't want to take the time as an educator and as a presenter to learn a bunch of tools that don't actually push student learning. So, can you tell us a little bit about how you discern whether or not a tool is worth your time or potentially even worth the time of your students?
That's a really good question. And some schools have tried to create rubrics and things like that to figure out, is this the thing we're going to approve? There's too much out there. There's too much out there. And to say what works for me is what's going to work for every other teacher is
Hmm.
probably not right either. That's what's great about it, is to personalize it. So when I look at a tool and what I recommend, I like to stick to tried and true. If it is in beta and it just came out like last week and I might be really excited about it, I'm not going to share that in a presentation with K-12 teachers. Now, I might share
Hmm.
it with some tech coaches who might be excited about that, but it depends on the audience. But in terms of just that classroom teacher, I don't want you to hit roadblocks when you go try something new. And kind of going back in my history, before I was teaching so much Google, I was doing a lot of iPad training. iPads were the thing before we had Chromebooks, and all these schools were buying them, and they were a nightmare to manage. But that became like the presentations and the training that was all about iOS apps. App after app after app. And yeah, there were many things, and there are some of them that are still around, but it quickly became too difficult to keep up with and to know, is this going to work on this machine? And that's why these web-based tools, I feel like, are kind of a step ahead, whether it's Google or Screencastify or whatever that you're using, that you have that at your fingertips, so that it doesn't require installation. It's not something that's going to slow your computer down, and that we don't have to create a million accounts. So that's another one for teachers, that if they have to create accounts, or depending if students have email, which is a whole other issue. But yeah, just making sure that it helps you. And what I always teach teachers is, you don't start with the tech tool. That's not, even though you might get excited like I do, like, oh, this is so cool, I can't wait to try these new features. That's not where you start. It might inspire you, but you start with your learning goal. You start with your standard. That's where you are. And then you pick from your toolbox what's going to help you get there. And that's where you stick with your tried and true tools, and you can gradually sprinkle in the new stuff. The kids like the new stuff. They get tired of Google Slides. that can become a crutch too, that you just use the same thing over and over. So we have to be careful and find that balance, and use the things that will engage our students, and not something that they get in every single classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is so important, to think about what's going to work, think about what's going to provide some variety, but also couched in what is going to help us teach the standard, teach what we sought out to do. So if teachers adopt technology more, and we adopt asynchronous learning and do all of the things that you have been talking about for years, what do our classrooms look like?
So I think we can have many different types of classrooms, and I think we have many different types of classrooms at the moment. We've got the face-to-face classrooms, but if you have asynchronous learning going on, you may have small group instruction going on in one corner. You've got students who are working on project-based learning in another corner, and some other students who may be creating something on their Chromebooks in another corner. I think one of the things that is scary for teachers, and it was scary for me the first time that I kind of made that shift, but like I said earlier, kind of every kid's not doing the same thing at the same time. And the power of embracing that asynchronous learning is, kids can watch and re-watch videos over and over as much as they need. You don't have to repeat a lesson for a student who is absent. That it's just like this magical clone of the teacher. But being able to do all the things, I had some teachers who were resistant to small group instruction because they think it's going to take longer, and they think all of these things will take longer. But honestly, once you get adapted to the new style, then it actually takes less time, because you're not doing all the work. The students are doing the work. When you lecture all the time, you're handling that full load for your kids and expecting them to absorb every moment, and it just doesn't happen. But in terms of the classroom itself, we may have some students online. Like I said, I really hope that those online students are taught by a different teacher and not with the face-to-face kids. I just think those are two different scenarios. And that blended environment is still very much the same. There is an adjustment to, I can't see what they're doing every second of the day. Having a trust level with your students and probably your parents, and being able, again, to build those relationships. That's how you're going to know what's going on. But also, accepting the fact that the internet exists, and that we can't shut things down. That's sort of another pet peeve of mine is how schools are, when you give a test or a quiz and you have to lock it down, you can't pretend that Google.com doesn't exist. If you can Google the answer, then maybe we need to ask deeper questions that aren't Googleable. So we have to, again, rethink the assignments that we're doing, whether that is face-to-face or blended, because those kids that are face-to-face are Googling it too under the desk with their phones. So, it's just about embracing the changes and using these things to our advantage. So instead of being intimidated and frustrated by the distraction, how can we use these tools for learning and teach kids what learning looks like, whether they are in our classroom or riding the bus home? If they are looking up a Minecraft trick on YouTube, that's learning. And I want students to recognize that, because that helps them build that growth mindset when they experience learning, that it doesn't have to happen within the four walls of the classroom or when the teacher is talking, that learning is theirs and that they can own it.
Kasey, I love that. I don't think that I have ever stopped, and it makes so much sense, but I don't think that I've ever stopped to say part of my job is to obviously teach the curriculum, but to also instill how folks learn, right? So if a student asks me a question and I say, go Google that question, I've given them the tool so that the next time that they have a question, whether that is how do I use a screwdriver or how big is Pluto, they know exactly how they can get that question answered again. And that, quite honestly, is a life skill that is going to persevere. I am under no disillusion that the students who I taught their eyes were watching God are still looking for similes in all of the novels that they're reading. They're probably not, right? But if I did teach them anything about constructing a sentence, about creating an argument, about researching, those are things that persevere and that they do continue to use regardless of what career they might have taken, which is kind of revelatory, right? To kind of think about our jobs in that way. And obviously we still think about standards, but thinking beyond that a little bit.
Exactly. I like to say the number one skill that we can teach our students is to learn how to learn. That everything's going to change so quickly for us right now, but it's only going to increase and get faster. And as technology increases and becomes more embedded in everything that we do. So we want our kids to grow up and to know how to find their own answers and how to solve their own problems. I have told the story so many times about my own journey through high school and into college. And, I did well in high school. I pleased my teachers. I turned in my work on time. I put my name on my paper. I brought my Kleenex in for extra credit. I was initially the teacher's pet, but I wasn't the kid that was getting in trouble. I made good grades. Everybody was happy. And then I went to college, and I quickly learned that no one had taught me how to learn. And when I got to college, they expected me to learn on my own. They weren't going to spoon feed me everything that I had been spoon fed through my K-12 experience. And I have seen that happen now countless times to so many other seniors making that transition to college or to the workforce or other things too, that, we can't just expect that a worksheet and a packet is going to prepare kids for the future, nor can we expect that we are building this entire workforce of Scantron bubble fillers that skill is going to take them anywhere either.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think I have seen a Scantron in at least a decade. So I can confirm from my adult experience that I am not seeing those play out.
Yeah, my boss doesn't ask me to do that.
Really. So absolutely, you are correct. Not only in what the next step is. I mean, when I taught 11th graders, they were 2 years shy of going into college. And we had to think about, okay, if I pass them out this worksheet, is that going to actually play well into what they're going to be asked to do? And I have to confess that I think that lots of times I've fallen short of that, of giving my kids the tools that they needed to be successful successful at the next stage. But I think that the awesome thing about teaching is we work with kids who are so forgiving and are so willing to try over and over. So we can say, you know what, last period didn't go the way that I thought it was going to go. Let's give it another try. Or to your point, in this back to school season, we're about to meet a whole new crop of students who don't know us from a can of paint. And it's an opportunity for us to re-engage and to rethink about how we approach education and how we approach our subjects.
Yes, back to school is like that fresh start every year. I think it's exciting and it's stressful, but I do love it. And I think in particular, this back to school season is a huge opportunity for big changes that we've needed for so many years in education, that hopefully we can turn this crisis into that opportunity to make some of these big strides that we've been talking about.
For sure, for sure. So I am really excited because every episode we ask our EdTech hero about a few tips for teachers. So we've talked about back to school, and I know that that is top of mind for so many folks. So I want to ask you, what is one tip that you can share with listeners or folks watching this on video about how they can get the most out of technology this school year?
So that's a good question. I may have to contemplate that one for a second. Get the most out of their technology. I think a lot of the things that we've hit on already, that mindset piece is huge. Not walking into the room saying, I'm not good with technology. That was one of the things teachers used to walk into my training and they would just tell me, like, warn me ahead of time. I just want you to know I'm just not good with technology. If I touch it, it breaks. That's mindset, right? That's that mindset. Sure. So you cannot walk in and expect that things are going to go wrong. You need to have a positive attitude, and you need to embrace these changes and these tools. And, we talk a lot about asynchronous, and really when I'm talking about asynchronous, I'm talking about video and creating videos, whether that's a screencast video or that's your face on the screen or both. A combination, even audio, can be very helpful for our students. And so if I was going to give like a specific tip that I think can really help aid that asynchronous thing and really kind of where I see schools and classrooms going, it is to work on those skills. And it is to ask, for the help that you need. So whoever your people are on your campus that can help you, know who those people are, make friends with those people, just like you make friends with a janitor. You got to know your people, and to make sure that, you attend the training that they do provide, and you reach out online to find those tutorials. So if you are using something like Screencastify, to record some lessons for your students, there are free resources and lots of tutorials and things like that. But I think honing your skills at recording video, knowing how to assign video, is a really big piece of that pie for blended learning at all, with the asynchronous option, but being open to that and knowing that it's not going to be perfect. So we are on a podcast right now that's edited. And, sometimes I get tongue-tied. Sometimes I tell people I run out of words, especially at the end of the day. I just start making up new words. But your classroom does not have to be perfect. And in fact, your kids kind of like it when you're not perfect. We talked about the power of making mistakes. So if you are making videos, not to get caught up in the fact that every video, that has some, oh, wait, I didn't mean to do that. Let me go back. Because what are you going to do in the face-to-face environment? That's what happens. So, just sort of accepting those little mistakes and those little things that go wrong, and just moving forward, because that's all we can do is we can keep the wheel moving and taking care of our kids. And of course, the bottom line is our kids. Our students are the reason why we do what we do, and taking care of them. And right now, and over the last 2 years, we've all needed a lot of grace. And that was something that I've talked a lot about, something that I interviewed a teacher who was teaching in China when COVID hit there, and she was actually from Texas, and she managed to get back to Texas. But she kind of warned me. She said, "Kasey, we're not preparing for the right things. The things that you think are going to happen." And one of the things she said is you have to give students, parents, teachers, everyone a lot of grace, because there's so much uncertainty. There's fear. This is unprecedented. And so just giving each other a little bit of grace, giving yourself some grace as a teacher, that we're still figuring this out. There is not one perfect solution to this problem that we're facing. So that, I think, is maybe the biggest tip that I can give, is just to give yourself some grace and give your students some grace.
There are lots of big tips there. Grace is so important. Highlighting being able to make friends with folks who are teaching alongside you, or potentially folks who are helping the building run. So thank you so much for all of those tips. And I've got one more question for you, Kasey. How can folks learn more about yourself and Shake Up Learning?
Sure. Well, pretty much everything is going to be at shakeuplearning.com. You will find information on the blog and the links to the podcast and all the Google cheat sheets and tutorials and everything else. I will go ahead and mention too that the conference website is shakeuplearning.com/conference. Go register for free. It starts on September 24th, but you will have access for a month to watch videos. So it's very much designed to help you learn when you want to learn. And feel free to reach out to me on social. Pretty much Shake Up Learning everywhere you go. So Twitter, Facebook, join the Facebook group. Talk to me on TikTok, do a little dance with me or something. So no, you can find us in lots of places.
All right. I'm so glad that you cleared that up, because I needed to know if you were in on the TikTok dance fads. And it sounds like the answer is yes. No, there are no dances.
No, there's no dances on my account. I was just kidding.
Oh, man. Okay. All right. We're going to follow and just demand dances until we get that on Shake Up Learning.
Okay. There we go.
Kasey, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate you joining EdTech Heroes. And teachers, be sure to visit shakeuplearning.com to learn more about how you can use technology to shake up your own classroom. I'm your host, Nef, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of EdTech Heroes, presented by Screencastify.